Welcome. Namaste, beautiful souls. Hello. I am here today to recap this week's insights, decks, readings, things that have been going on here on my tarot table, and a very warm welcome to all of you. If you are new, my name is Sadhana, and it's lovely to have you here. So, I'm going to start today with something that I haven't shared on my channel yet. I did make I did infer to this a couple of weeks ago, where I did a side by side of the Centennial Waitsmith and this deck on the left, along with, what was the other deck that I used? Oh, yes, the AGM Tarot of Weight, Tarot of Weight. And I went and purchased the deck that's on the right, the Tarot Original. It's not one that I had ever picked up. And this whole unfolding of what's going on in all of these Waitsmith facsimiles is really, to me anyway, really, really interesting. Welcome, Patricia. Thank you for joining me. So I thought I would share this with you. So I thought this version, the Slow Scarabeo deck, was still available. I have seen it, and I know this came out in multiple languages. Let me just open this. So this, I'm going to have to really keep these separate. This is unique in that it is a low scarabeo deck that doesn't have multiple languages on it. And it is the same size as low scarabeo decks. It's a little bit narrower. And this one is sold as a Waitsmith original. And in the video a couple of weeks ago, I was going through looking at the colors and the faces, and noticing the effects of the narrower card. I also was paying attention to skin tones and other things. And after I did, and the red cards, hi Clevis, welcome. The red cards were really not sitting well with me. So that's when I went back to some of the articles by K. Frank Jensen, who is, or the late K. Frank Jensen, who wrote and some great articles and did tremendous research into the history of this deck. And in comparing this deck, so again, this box here, Low Scarabeo, and this particular one that I have is 2016, right? So it's not that old. And if I go to the inside, there is no mention of inspiration from what version of the Pamela Coleman Smith, Arthur Edward Waite deck this comes from. There are other languages in the book here. And in going through Frank Jensen's articles, I soon realized that this deck is based on the Pam B Tarot. And if you know his articles, he compares and contrasts the little squiggle that's up here Lots of clues in the Sun card, the way that the fabric of the flag is drawn, the foot of the baby, the wall. There's so many little things. And then checking in with the Lover's card as well, too. It's a telltale sign that this is different, as well as the colors, among other things. So the big question is with the PAM-B is, why didn't the person who redrew the PAM-B use the images from Waite's book? How did this happen? And of course, we will never know. Sorry, I was looking for the Lover's card. So in my estimation, this definitely is a this deck is inspired by the PAM-B, which is not the original Pamela Coleman Smith Arthur Edward Waite deck. It is a redrawing of it. Very close. It still maintains that, and I'm going to use the term ukiyo-e effect, the wood cut effect. And I think something that I have recently come to appreciate is the fact that Pamela Coleman Smith studied Japanese woodcuts and based her art and her work. If you look at some of her other work, a lot of these decks come with a centennial weight comes with them. There's a few decks that come with extra artwork by Pamela Coleman Smith, and you can see the influence of this Japanese art on her work. And this makes me really appreciate even this deck, which is still based closely on the original artwork. So what happens in this deck, in this particular card, there are some obvious changes. The face of the angel changes. And like I said in that comparison, I'm not sure where I said it, but the way that Arthur Edward Waite describes the face of the angel is one of looking down upon the figures in the card, and the energy is, it's like a benevolent energy. And here the angel is looking out, not looking down, or the eyes appear to be a little bit open, not closed. So there's lots of differences, particularly this color. And what happens as well too with the size of the cards, for me, is an issue. So this is definitely not based on the PAM-A tarot. And then, okay, so this is where it gets. Hello, Sean, welcome. And Amelia, did I say hello to you? Welcome. This deck that came out more recently, I remember when I saw this first come out, it came out as a round version as well too. Just let me get the little white book. All right, so it says 1909. Okay, so what deck came out in 1909 was the PAM-B. Sorry, the PAM-A. The PAM-A came out in 1909. This is printed in 2024. And there is and it says this is the original. Well, it's not the original. This deck is also based on the PAM-B. So I don't understand why Sasha Graham would be part of a false marketing, because it is. This is pretty much exactly the same deck as this one, which is what I guessed. It also has the same red and black, the lily and rose backs, which is not the original back for the 1909. So if I go in here as well too, there's some really funky stuff. So the way that the minor arcana is described, pentacles, swords, wands, and cups, is this bizarre order for presenting the suits. And then court cards, it says Page, Knight, King, Queen. This is also a really bizarre way to present this. I don't know who put this booklet together, and it's credited to Sasha Graham. And I don't think this booklet was carefully edited at all. It is a multiple language booklet as well, too. So if I were Sasha Graham, I'd be kind of embarrassed by this, actually. So buyer beware. Buyer beware. This is not an original 1909. Now, the backs of the Pam A, according to, hi Sarah, according to Mr. Staunton's research, the first back was the crackle back, the brownie bronze ones, which were on the German deck that I shared, is the original back. And there is evidence that both the Pam A was reprinted with the same cuts with these backs as well as the blue lily backs. Both of those have been found and located, and there's information about that. But the first back was the bronze or the brown pebble back or crackle backs. So yeah, so this one, and I want to be careful not to mix up the boxes because these two decks are so very similar, is the same back. It is the same low scarabeo size. It is a remarketing of this deck, which is not a Pam A, it's a Pam B. It's got the same squashed up faces with, it's the same greeny color. And if I go to, it's exactly the same deck. And if I go to the Justice card, it's got that same oversaturated red color. So it's been a long time since I taught a public tarot class, but I'm thinking of going to or proposing to my local metaphysical store an orientation of presently available Waite Smith decks. Also educating the owner of the shop a little bit. I think that's also a good thing. But yeah, what has come for me out of all of this and is most important, and many of you know that I have a deep connection with the country of Japan. I lived there for many years. I feel like an ancestral connection, a deep past life spiritual connection with the country. Love the language. I just felt so in sync when I learned the language, and when I came back to Canada and studied again. So I did a year at university and did all the Japanese language courses so I could add that to my curriculum vitae, and I was teaching school at the time. It was just so natural, so very, very natural. So that extends into the art and an appreciation for Pamela Coleman Smith's study of woodcuts and Japanese art. So where I'm going with this is that the other deck that I compared with the Centennial Waite and the AGM Tarot of Waite was the Universal. And this is a lovely recoloring by Mary. Oh my goodness, now her name is Mary Hanson Roberts. This is a deck that I used for photographs, and I've used this deck a lot in teaching materials. just because it photographs really well. And this particular deck, and I have another issue with US games in that both this deck and the Radiant Weight, so I have filmed a side-by-side of Universal and Radiant Weight, and I will get that up soon, are sold as recolorings. But they're not recolorings. They are redrawings and recolorings. The lines are different. And while this one in hand, this is the Universal, is a better redrawing, there is some attempt to capture more of Pamela Coleman Smith's art. If you look at like the face of the angel in this card, for example, the eyes are closed. It does capture the mood of how Waite described the card, but yet it is most definitely a complete redrawing and recoloring of the deck, as is the Radiant Weight, and you'll hear me talk about that when I get that video up. And so I want to say shame on you, US Games, for not stating that people think somehow the original artwork has been scanned and turned to a monochromatic background and then recolored, that because that's not the case. There are so many differences, and this is very, it's very, very subtle, and I promise I'll get that the video up really soon where I talk more about that. But I don't think early on in my journey I appreciated this or even worried about this, because when I started working with the Waite Smith deck, I had a mini version of the plaid backs. This is 26, 27 years ago. And the plaid backs are pretty close, I believe, to the Pam A, so they have that woodcut effect to them. And I didn't really resonate with the artwork. It was a kit that came with the Thoth Tarot. It was called the Complete Tarot. It had a mini Thoth and a mini Waite Smith deck. And I worked with both of them for a while, and then I went to I found the Robin Wood deck, and that became my deck for a while. And so I don't think early in my journey I appreciated this, but this is now kind of important to me, and I just offer my research and my observations up to all of you, because it's been fun, actually. And so beyond the line work and what I've observed in those decks, there are a number of even more greatly colored decks. And so this week I did a side-by-side of this deck, which is the Wiser, and the Albano Waite. And this was really fun. I scoured the internet for information about Frankie Albano, who was a musician. I listened to some of his music and really sort of appreciated the psychedelic nature of these cards and the era that this deck was drawn. And I want to look at this deck in conjunction with, I think I have my Groovy Weight still. So I'm gonna do that, because I know that while the figures in that deck definitely have changed, there's a Buddha and other changes. The colors are going to be very, very similar to this one. And what happened in the Wiser, well, we have a much nicer cardstock for one, but this deck was an attempt to bring diversity to the Waite-Smith Tarot by coloring the skin of many of the figures. And I think as well, too, it did a good job in some of the moodiness of some of the cards. And so this week I compared the Wiser and the Albano Waite with the Radiant Waite, which are all advertised as or sold as recolorings of the Waite-Smith deck. And I think these two decks certainly do look more like the original in the thick lines. And those thick lines are part of a style, right? They're part of woodcut or lino cut style. And there's also it's the PAMD, right? PAMD. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in this, just kind of interested. How the versions of the Waite-Smith Tarot were published. And from what I understand is, and I get that it's happened with a lot of the Tarot de Marseille decks as well too, even the current facsimiles, the ones that have come out in the last 20 years, that things need to be reprinted, and sometimes paper changes, the actual printer will change, there is not quality control with the level of the ink from the running of the first 100 decks to the 1000th deck, right? So there can be lots of subtle changes. But there are also in the PAMD Tarot, which is a combination, you'll have to go back to those articles that I put underneath, and some of you may know more about Frank Jensen's work, is that there is one version of the PAM decks that is layering photographs, and it looks quite blurry. And I really think that the Albano Waite may be based on the PAMD for that reason, for its blurriness in some of the cards. But it's a really fun recoloring, and I had hoped that I would be able to bring more of the astrological correspondences with the Albano Waite, because I was really excited about some of the Marshall decans looking very fiery and red, but that's really not the case. It's just a kind of a psychedelic 1960s coloring. Yeah. So I think they're really cool decks, and they serve they bring a mood. This one certainly brings a mood, and I commend the creators of this deck for attempting to bring diversity to this deck that has no diversity, at least diversity in skin color. And in doing that, there are a lot of the cards become quite dark, and it's hard to differentiate some of the detail in the Wiser. But I do appreciate what happened with this deck. And the other thing too that's really great about this deck is that there is a consistency in the coloring among the suits, and that can be really helpful as a beginner deck. So I can see this deck being very attractive as a study deck for beginners, because all of the swords cards are purple. Even the swords are purple. And in the air deck, in the air suit, I believe the color is yellow, and the pentacles are all green. So that is really nice if you are a beginner, and might really help in learning the tarot and having another layer for the elements. So I think that's very commendable. And I do encourage that when I'm teaching tarot. One of the decks that I recommend is Stephen Bright's Waite-Smith inspired deck, because in his deck the suits are color-coded, and often the element, not always, but often the color of the major arcana, the element of the color of the major arcana. So for example, let's say that the Empress is Venus, and it also has an earth nature to it. It may be green and matches the Pentacles cards, but that fits a little bit with major minors, but not always. But it's a great deck too. I love Stephen Bright's deck. So yeah, so that's what I've been up to this week with the Waite-Smith Tarot, and the journey continues. And the next part of that, I will do the groovy or the trip and wait with the Albano, and I've got a few other thoughts of some things going on. Unfortunately, I don't have any old decks, and there are a few amazing tarot collectors on YouTube that have shared some of their older versions, and kind of wished I had gotten into it 30 years ago, but oh well, hindsight, right? Hindsight. So the other major project that I am working on is the Arthurian tarots. And this week, my third Arthurian tarot arrived, the one by John and Kathleen Matthews. And this particular version, I believe it's the 25th anniversary version, which is amazing. You know, it kind of reminds me of, I have the 25th anniversary edition of the Enchanted Tarot. I think it's now in its 30th year. So it really shows you the longevity of a great deck, that this is still actually being published, right? There must be something really good here. And I think perhaps the beauty of this deck is in its, and I don't know what was in the guidebook of the original one, but it's a great reference, I think, for other tarots, in that it helps to give a clear understanding of the relationship among number, suit, court, and so forth. And yes, there is a whole other layer of story that is built into this deck, but it's still a great teaching deck. I would never choose this kind of deck as a first deck, but kind of excellent. And not, I mean, some of the paintings are beautiful, but not a great fan of this artwork, and I will show you some of the cards. However, in this deck, unlike my main deck for the study with the Arthurian Tarot, which is the out of print one, you don't have the name of the king or the place on the card. The information for that is often in the guidebook. So for example, here the High Priestess is the Lady of the Lake, but Lady of the Lake is not on the card itself. You would have to work with the guidebook to know that that was indeed Lady of the Lake. And there are many place names that are named, and the stories are unfolded in a little less detail than in Legend, the Arthurian Tarot. So my project is to weave all of this together. And I was really excited. Some of you commented that you are working with part 2 of this book, which is a year-long, kind of reminds me of the Wildwood journey. Hi, Kim. Welcome. So if you work with the Wildwood Tarot, there's a year-long journey that goes with that deck. But this deck also has a year-long self-reflection as part of this book. So that's really something. This is a very meaty guidebook, and the first half would be what you would expect in a tarot book, and then the second half is the study guide, the meditations, the journal prompts, and the deeper reflections that go with this deck. And so yeah, a deck that has really, really stood the test of time. Okay, so here, this is what it looks like. It has black borders. And the scenery is framed with an archway. And in the minor arcana, you don't have humans. It is like, and help me here, I think of Spacious Tarot, but there are other tarots where there aren't humans. I think a little bit maybe of the Majestic Tarot, or maybe the Linescape Tarot, where you step into the scenery. It's a lovely Empress card. That is a major. Let's get to some minors. And you look out on the landscape and picture yourself in the scene. And doesn't this remind you of the Chariot card in the Spacious Tarot? So I'm really excited to start working with this, and I will be recording the Magician episode in the next couple of days. So yeah, so I will do my best to weave together. So there's the Ace of Cups in that deck. And I know a lot of people have this deck. It is out of print. I have seen it for sale still on eBay. And some of the cards do have more of intensity in the color, but many of them, and this is a beautiful card of Arthur the Emperor, many of the cards are kind of washed out. All these ones I'm showing you are full of color. And maybe it's the majors that have more color. Because when you get to there's the Ace of Cups in, I just passed it. Where did it go? Sorry. I just wanted to hold the two Aces of Cups together to show you. There it is. And this was part of my initial impression of this deck, was that a lot of the cards the art's kind of faded, and it's hard to make out what's going on in the scene. And thank God the book does a really good job of describing what's happening in the scene. And yet it also does make it appear more like a dream sequence, that we are sort of behind a veil. And that really does tap into the mythology idea, working with story. Yeah. So really, really appreciative of having this deck and the book that goes with it. And yet, you know, what's really kind of, maybe it's a dichotomy, is that Legend the Arthurian Tarot, this one, was created by somebody who was interested from childhood, grew up in the UK, did a lot of research for the deck, and I compare and contrast that with John Matthews. And John Matthews is so sagacious. So if you've listened to him talk about old tales and legends from Logos, from England, from Wales, he just feels he knows so much. And so I feel like it's unfair comparing the wisdom of John and Kathleen Matthews with Anna Marie Ferguson, and yet her work really does stand up. So it really, really exciting. And then I will be bringing in some of the cards from Claire Duval's deck as well too. I know many of you are Anatolian fans, and what this deck does differently is there are places and characters that are brought into the story, but for example, this card here really talks about the act of being knighted rather than the story of a particular knight being knighted. So it goes more into the concept, the archetype, rather than the legends themselves. And there's not a lot of details of the legends in the guidebook. Also, this deck makes a concerted attempt to look like a Waite-Smith inspired deck, where the other two decks do not. And I have this other observation, and it has to do, and it fits for the Wildwood Tarot, it fits for the decks of Emily Carding, and it has to do with decks coming out of the UK. And I say that there's like these different schools of thought on the tarot. Like there's the Wildwood, these Arthurian decks. I put Emily Carding in there. And then there is Golden Dawn. And Golden Dawn has a set structure for the tarot: Wands, Cups, Swords, Pentacles. And this other school always begins with air. And sometimes air is associated with swords, and sometimes air is associated with fire. And it gets really confusing. And so and I also think this might have something to do with playing card associations, which I studied for about 40 weeks last year and gave up because I was so discombobulated I didn't know what to do with it. But I'm hoping that when I get to the minors in the Arthurian decks, that I can really kind of sit and reflect and share some deeper insights into these subtleties between spears and wands and fire and air and swords, and the active nature of the swords. And I know this gets confounded because of the teachings from Crowley and how the knights are the kings and the knights are fire and the princes are air, and it's a melding pot of confusion. And I have really found my way with this, and then I work with decks like this who are all over the place, and I will share that with you when we get to those decks. Yeah. Okay. So I have not started working with I Am the Artist yet, but I thought what I would do is to do a reading, inspiration. Here we are early in Pisces season. It is the second month. It is the 22nd day. And so let's use I Am the Artist by Saki Saki for a reading for this day, while I push some of these other cards out of the way. I have looked through this is all I've been doing with the deck, is going through it and looking at cards, and interesting how it's like the corpus callosum is integrated here. Really just observing this deck. That's all I've been doing with it so far. But I would like to do a 3-card reading. And if you would like a individual card, I'm happy to draw that for you as well too. And like I said, super inspired by the book, by Monica's book. Yeah. So in the intensity of the first decan of Pisces season in general, here we are at the second day of February 2025. How can we step forward, growing, understanding, expanding, being in the flow of water, continuing to live and live life amidst so much unexpected energy. And yesterday, here on the west coast of BC, very close to where I live, 20 kilometers or so away, there was an earthquake. And we've never had an earthquake of that magnitude here. And I was at school, and I work with special needs kids, and I was within seconds underneath the table with distraught special needs children who are already anxiety ridden. So it was quite an afternoon yesterday. And adding a natural phenomena like that on top of the socio-political stuff that's going on, it's really a head shaker. So I'm looking for just a breath and a simple message for navigating the week ahead. And as always, I ask this message be in the highest for the greatest good, and that no harm be done. So be it. The bottom card always wants to stick to the table. Okay. Did I not take out the... All right, so I thought I took out all the extra cards. This is one of the extra cards. And can I say how... I let this in by accident, and this is the first card that is chosen. You know, my Integrative Healing with Sadhana, the tagline is trust your inner wisdom. And part of this deck is using your inner muse, using your creativity for your spiritual transformation. And yesterday when the earthquake struck, I was in the art room with these children. And I'm just thinking, maybe, it's through creativity that we can heal. That's how we need to heal. And there's also something kind of tangible about having a paintbrush in hand, or even a tarot deck. Maybe your creativity is your readings. Maybe it's about painting a wall in your child's bedroom, and doing a mural. If it's dance, there's a tangibility to your physical body and your movement, and how the energy flows with your physical body. So be guided by your creativity. Listen to your inner muse. This is, and find a connection between that and something you can hold, something tangible. Okay. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. This is, wow. Okay, so what I'm observing here is, look at this inverse relationship between the legs in the devil and the legs, the way the legs are drawn in the Hanged One. And it's like the Hanged One is hanging in the reality of this world. The Hanged One isn't hanging on a tree. It's sort of in a well of life. And then we have this card of expansion. This is Jupiter in Gemini. And feeling the inability, there's something that is holding me back from expanding and allowing my creative energy to burst forth. And then we have a card that really knows how to burst forth. This card in some way feels bound. This card is bound, and this card is free. And maybe our inner muse wants exactly that, wants us to break free of bindings. I feel like I've said this before already, to live life, to let life, to be present, to appreciate what we have, to sing if we feel like singing, to paint if we feel like painting, to embroider if we feel like embroidering. And I smile because that's a project that I have taken on recently, being inspired by an art class I did with the kids. So yeah, oh my goodness. Hi, Catherine. Welcome. Yeah. How can you break free of perceived limitations? Maybe this juxtaposition of the Hanged Man and the devil says, pause and think about this. What are these bindings, and are they really necessary? And in a way, I'm thinking about how I'm wondering what the earthquake geographically, or now geologically, broke free of. Symbolically, I had something break in my house. So I want to think about that as well too, right? Because that's a breaking free. And I really appreciate this deck creator maintaining the red clothing of the woman in this card, because red is symbolic of that. This is a Jupiter card. It is about expansion. So, dance, my friends, paint. All right, Clevis would appreciate a card. So this one's for you, Clevis. Do a quick shuffle and cut. What's going on here? Mars in Capricorn. So a call to action. This actually kind of fits Clevis. You know how Capricorn is also Saturn. This matches up with the energy of the devil. There's something really different in this card in that there's only one figure. I like how the creator has maintained the bench. So in lieu of a bench, there's a ladder here, and this figure is up on the ladder. I don't know what you might read into the mask. And remember that the threes are, it's not quite birthed yet, right? It's not quite birthed yet. Breaking through a tangible project, perhaps. All right, so I'm putting Clevis's card back in. I'm going to keep those 4 cards on the table. And this card is for Sarah. All right, Sarah. I love the whimsical nature of the backs of these cards. Okay. Why does the mentor have a chessboard? So you have the Hierophant, which is renamed. So Taurus, earthing energy, grounding energy, guide, a disseminator of energy. The eyes are closed. We have in conjunction, so the devil is Capricorn, which is earth. The Hierophant is earth. Is that a snake coming out of the chessboard? Is it even a chessboard? I'm not quite sure what you might read into that. But I like the closed eyes. Almost, when I think of the Hierophant, I think of where the mentor, we receive information in from a number of sources. And I think as a good mentor that we need a moment where we need to be in the constant process of receiving that information and letting it land before we share it. So as a mentor, as a guide, as someone who is supporting others, take your time to process and receive information before you pass it on. Think about the inner muse card and how the quality and the interpretation of, and what you might do, the interpretation, what you might do with that information, and who is ready to receive your support. And maybe if I integrate this, maybe this is about you engaging more as that mentor. All right, this card is for Amelia. Amelia says, today we created a dream catcher with my daughter using swan feathers and seashells and hagstones. Wow. I dived into learning to play my lyre harp and started a huge canvas. Pisces season is here. Wow. All right, this is for you. Okay, so it's the Seven of Swords. It's a different perspective. It's walking straight forward. Really interesting eye expression. There's something about the path, the instability, the roughness of the path. They are about to step over some uneven ground. I don't know, call me crazy, but is there anything about the 5 swords pointing to the root chakra? This is a lunar decan. Aquarius energy. And the most significant timing thing about this card is this is the decan that precedes Pisces season. So what happened a couple of weeks ago that led you to make decisions to find yourself where you are now? I always feel like this card is about reclaiming something. And it's facing you, right? It's facing you forward. Okay. I think that's my best piece of advice here, is to sit in reflection of before we went into Pisces season, that last couple of weeks of Aquarius season. What is it you picked up from that time, and that feels significant in what you are carrying forward? However, it may have caused you some pause, some questioning, some doubt. And I would say that it is that doubt that is the teacher. So stay with that. There is a reason that you left that behind and you took this with you. Okay, so one more. So last card for today. This is for Ravneet. Ravneet, you've been here before. I recognize your name. Or you've commented on my videos. Maybe just not in a live chat. All right, these cards are just sliding to the perfect place. Okay, so this is the Queen of Cups. This really, while Queens are cardinal and Queen of Cups is Cancer, this is water. She is deep in the water, right? She's standing in the water, fully immersed in the change, fully immersed in her intuition, her emotions. And I feel like whatever is on that boat, she is letting go. She's not attached to who is on that boat or what is on that boat. It almost appears as if she is dancing in the water. She could be at a, what do you call it? Do you know those exercise classes you do at the pool? Aquasize or whatever. She's having fun, and I feel like she's taking the message of the entire reading and allowing the water to inspire and move her. And it's through this immersion in the water that she breaks free. Yeah, aquafit. That's right. Yeah. She too is a guide, right? All queens are guides, they're leaders, they initiate. And maybe if you tap into your emotional situation right now, this is meant to inspire others. So one thing I always say about the queens is that they set the stage, they create the environment for others to thrive. So it is important that you set the stage for others to share their stories. And if you think about this in terms of the whole reading and that first card of the inner muse, this could be something quite practical, like you buying a new watercolor paint set for your child who is struggling and they're not sharing, and you buy them a new watercolor paint set, and maybe that's the last thing in the world they want to do is paint, but it's the gesture. And it's funny I say watercolor, right? It feels like there's something about that that's important. You create the space. The intuitive queen creates the space for others to feel and to express that. And I think all of us can take from this reading this sense of contrast between being bound and being free. All right, I think I will leave you with that. May you all find a way to be fully present and to live life well this week. I'll see you next Saturday. Take good care. Namaste.